Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Make sure to like this video, go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, and make sure to check out everything we have to offer over at thegridironexpert.com. The links for all those things are in the description below, so do not miss out on any of the extra fun and any of the extra college football content. Well, guys, college football is just one of those things that is so great, but it makes absolutely no sense. It's so crazy. It's so unpredictable. And just when you think you figured it out, just when you think you figured out who's legit and who's not, who the playoff contenders are, who's real, who's a pretender, something like Week 9 comes along and screws everything up. But in the end, that is what makes college football so great. That is what makes college football so much fun for us, the fans, and for us, the analysts out there. Week 9 provided, once again, one of the crazier weeks of college football. We saw 7 top 25 teams fall, 4 of which came to unranked opponents. And of course, we are here to break down the madness that happened in Week 9 that will greatly shape the college football playoff race when those rankings are released just next week, and will greatly shape up this new AP Top 25 poll, which of course we'll have our analysis out for that tomorrow. So let's jump right into it, starting with obviously the biggest game of the day, the shocker of the day. For the third straight week, a top 10 team has gone down to an unranked opponent. Just a few weeks ago, South Carolina went on the road and defeated Georgia, the number 3 team at the time. Just last week, number 6 Wisconsin fell to Illinois, a team we have on our trending up board, so you don't want to miss our analysis on the Fighting Illini. And just this week, number 5 Oklahoma, Jalen Hurts, the Heisman frontrunner, went on the road to Manhattan to take on Chris Klieman and Kansas State, and the Sooners fell to the Wildcats 48-41. Nobody saw that coming. While many thought that maybe Kansas State could slow down the Sooners, while many thought that they might make it respectable, nobody thought that Oklahoma was going to go on the road and lose this game. Not with this dynamic offense, but their defense was their downfall in this game against the Wildcats. The Sooners trailed by 25 points in the fourth quarter before making a pretty monstrous comeback, having an opportunity to recover an onside down by a touchdown. But they touched the onside kick with half a yard to go. The ball went 9.5 yards. Oklahoma touched it, even though they did recover. Because they touched it a half yard early, Kansas State got the ball back, ended up winning the game. But their defense allowed 426 yards and 213 rushing yards, and that simply just will not fly. I don't care what conference you're in, but that's not going to fly if you're trying to make the college football playoff. So a shocking upset. All the credit to the Wildcats. I said in the preseason that I thought Chris Klieman, out of the 4 or 5 new, brand new Big 12 coaches, I thought Chris Klieman inherited the best team. I thought he inherited the best situation. And he is obviously proving me right, as his Wildcats not only trending up, which we'll get to them, but are 5-2 right now, should find themselves in the next top 25 rankings and pull it off once again, one of the upsets of the year. Oklahoma's playoff hopes are not done. They're not over. But they took a major blow, and there's a lot less room for error after this loss to the Wildcats. And of course, if you want to kind of tie in Chris Klieman and his Wildcats roots, kind of why he's there now, let's go back and look at what happened at College Game Day this Saturday. As number 1 North Dakota State traveled to number 3 South Dakota State in the FCS. So number 1 FCS team, number 3 FCS team in the Dakota marker game. Many people were angry that College Game Day went there and didn't go to a game like LSU or Auburn or Notre Dame, Michigan. But let me tell you what, this game at South Dakota State absolutely deserved College Game Day. An amazing environment, an amazing atmosphere for this big-time rivalry game that the Bison ended up winning over the Jackrabbits. And it was a thriller. If you like defense, if you like close games, if you like rivalry games, you needed to tune into this game. North Dakota State held South Dakota State to just 110 yards passing and didn't allow a touchdown from the Jackrabbits until 7 minutes left, till 7:22 remaining in the game. Now, at that point, the game was tied, 16-16, when they allowed that touchdown. But on 4th and 1, North Dakota State got gutsy. They intercepted a pass from the Jackrabbits with about 5 minutes left, got the ball back. On 4th and 1, decided to go for it instead of punting, and ended up busting out a 71-yard touchdown run from Adam Cofield. That won the game with 2.5 minutes left. North Dakota State survives 23-16. They are now 8-0. And as they said everywhere, if you watch the game, if you watch the highlights, there's a reason the Bison have won 7 of the past 8 FCS national championships. Chris Kleiman responsible for a handful of those. He is thriving at Kansas State now, and North Dakota State continues to thrive without him. So a thriller at the site of College Game Day. If you haven't seen the highlights, go check it out. Some serious football being played in the FCS. Now, of course, going back, we went back to the 11 o'clock games. Ohio State took easy care of Wisconsin, a game that some people thought would be close. Maybe Wisconsin would bounce back, and a game that others, like myself, thought that Ohio State would take fairly easily. And they did, beating the Badgers 38-7 in a game that was a torrential downpour, tons of rain, obviously making it difficult for both quarterbacks in Justin Fields and Jack Cohn. So both teams, as we mentioned in our Ohio State-Wisconsin preview video, we're going to have to rely on their run game. And Ohio State did just that. J.K. Dobbins torching the Badgers. 163 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns, while Jonathan Taylor, for Wisconsin, only had 52 yards on the ground and no touchdowns. So once again, doesn't make or break his Heisman case whatsoever, but when you're a Heisman hopeful, you have to have big games against elite defenses. You have to have big games against elite teams. Jonathan Taylor and the Wisconsin team, period, were unable to do that, even though they only trailed 10-7 with 12 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Their defense kind of unfolded after that, and Ohio State walked away with a 38-7 victory, once again looking like the number 1 team in the country. Later on in the day, LSU survived a scare in the Tiger game. The LSU Tigers facing off against the Auburn Tigers. That potent passing attack from LSU and Joe Burrow put up some big numbers against Auburn, one of the better defenses they had faced all season. Burrow throwing for 321 yards and a touchdown, but it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire that was the difference maker in this game for LSU, rushing for 136 yards and 1 touchdown. The Tigers getting some key stops when they needed them the most. Bo Nix, once again, not putting up that impressive of stats. A little over 150 yards and a touchdown in Death Valley. Not good enough to go on the road and get a win there. LSU wins 23-20. Auburn's playoff hopes are just about done, as that's going to be their second loss. LSU and Florida coming to them. Quality losses, don't get me wrong. And the Tigers put up a heck of a fight. But even though they have Georgia and Alabama still remaining on their schedule, 2 conference losses is probably enough to keep them out of the SEC title race and potentially the college football playoff race as well. But that does set up a number 1 versus number 2 showdown between Alabama and LSU on November 9th. You're not going to want to miss that. Tua Tagovailoa should be back for that one. 2 potent passing attacks, 2 of the best offenses in the country. Which defense will be able to get the stops the most? We're going to have coverage for that all week long when they face off on the 9th in 2 weeks. Now, of course, going down further, Penn State kind of got the monkey off their back after falling back-to-back years to Michigan State in upset fashion. Not that, Michigan State was a bad team in those years, but Penn State was definitely the superior team, but lost both of those games to the Spartans back in 2018 and 2017. They finally got their revenge, going on the road to Michigan State and beating them 28-7. The Penn State defense forced 4 turnovers in that game. So Penn State's defense, guys, is, I think, looking like one of the best in the country. So the Nittany Lions, undefeated, setting up an undefeated showdown at Minnesota here in a few weeks. Obviously huge for both squads because Penn State's still very much alive in the Eastern Division to win that division and make the college football playoff, while Minnesota controls their own destiny in the Big Ten West. So a huge showdown coming up in a few weeks as well between the Nittany Lions and the Gophers. Penn State didn't choke this time, get the win over the Spartans. One of those other ranked versus ranked teams that went down was number 15 Texas, who, in case you didn't know, is not back. They are not back, and they will not be back until they can beat good teams and beat them consistently. Congratulations, you beat Oklahoma last year. Congratulations, you beat Texas, or you beat Georgia last year in the Sugar Bowl. But this year, they have lost to LSU at home. They have lost to Oklahoma, and now they have lost to TCU in a game where Sam Ehlinger, one of the better quarterbacks in the country, threw 4 interceptions. They're not back. TCU's defense stepped up. 37-27 victory for the Horned Frogs. That is Texas's third loss. And I get 2 of them are quality, LSU and Oklahoma. But this one was inexcusable for Tom Herman and his squad. A 10-point loss to the Horned Frogs. Texas is not back, and they're struggling and still might not even make the Big 12 championship game, as they have yet to play Iowa State or Baylor. Now, of course, speaking of Iowa State, Oklahoma State took easy care of the Cyclones, going on the road to Ames and defeated the Cyclones 34-27. Chuba Hubbard had another huge game, 116 yards on the ground, and that's actually pretty good. Iowa State contained him. They were only allowing 111 rushing yards per game, so they allowed 5 more than their average. They did a pretty decent job, but the passing attack for Oklahoma State really stepped it up. We said they needed to do that, and they did. And the defense stepped up, getting a crucial pick 6 later on in the fourth quarter. They beat the Cyclones 34-27 and also forced 3 interceptions from Brock Purdy. So the Big 12, guys, one of the more craziest conferences this Saturday. You had Oklahoma falling to Kansas State. You had this Oklahoma State upset over Iowa State. You had TCU's upset over Texas. And when you see we have Texas Tech trending down on our board, we'll get to them and explain to you why that game against Kansas was so crazy as well. So a wild, wild day in the Big 12. That's 8 Big 12 teams, guys, out of the 10 that had some wild matchups. So we'll definitely get to that. But come on, Big 12, you're screwing me up here. And then finally, the last game we want to address is, of course, the nightcap with Michigan and Notre Dame. I said back in our Week 9 predictions that I thought that was the toughest game to pick going into Week 9. I really saw that either way. Vegas saw that either way. Really, when the game ended, it was a pick-em game. Or if Michigan or Notre Dame was favored, it was only by like 1 point. But Michigan showed up. They made a statement. We didn't know how Michigan was going to respond after that crushing loss to Penn State. Notre Dame was coming off a bye week. Showed that they could play on the road against Georgia. But in a game with, once again, heavy rain that made it difficult for both quarterbacks, it was Michigan's defense that made the difference, and it was Michigan's running game that made the difference against a Notre Dame squad that looked absolutely confused and didn't seem like they just wanted to be there. Thought they might walk into the big house and escape with a victory, and that would be that. And Jim Harbaugh said, not so fast, that's not going to be the case. The Wolverines beat Notre Dame 45-14, holding the Fighting Irish to 180 total yards compared to the Wolverines' 437 total yards. Michigan had 303 rushing yards and ended their 8-game losing streak to top 10 teams under Jim Harbaugh. So while Michigan has, yes, lost to Wisconsin and Penn State, so they are out of the Big Ten title race because they're not going to really jump, in my opinion, Penn State or Ohio State. That's a signature win for Jim Harbaugh that kind of saves his job at least for a little while longer. Still got some tough opponents coming their way, but a convincing win over a top 10 rival. Huge, huge, huge for the Wolverines. Notre Dame definitely going to drop out of the top 10. Michigan could jump from 19th to 14th or maybe even higher after that performance. So a wild, wild day of college football. Greatly going to shape up the rankings. Greatly going to shape up the college football playoff picture. Let's take a look at our teams trending up and trending down. We'll start with Illinois here. And I can tell you that when this season started, I never expected to have Illinois on my teams trending up. I probably expected to have them on my teams trending down, but not trending up. But the Fighting Illini, guys, last week beat Wisconsin. Upsets happen. Was Illinois legit? Were they for real? We didn't know. It was a great win. Well, this week said that they were legit, that they maybe could get to their first bowl game since 2014. They went on the road and beat Purdue 24-6. And I get that's a beat-up Purdue team. I get it. But when you go on the road to a conference opponent, whether they're beat up or not, and beat them by 18 points, that is impressive. The Fighting Illini get an 18-point win there. They're 4-4 this year. They went 4-8 last year. They had already matched last year's win total. And they still have winnable home games against Rutgers and Northwestern. They win both of those or maybe pull off an upset on the road. Illinois and Lovie Smith is going bowling for the first time since 2014. So look out for the Fighting Illini taking a major step forward and finally getting to where they wanted to be in Lovie Smith's 4th year in Champaign. Now I've got UCLA up here. What's all that about? UCLA was struggling bad under Chip Kelly. They struggled mightily last year. They struggled early this year. So how are they on our teams trending up? Because they've won 3 of their last 5 games. Now, granted, they are just 3-5. But 2 of those games came against ranked opponents. That 32-point comeback win against Washington State a few weeks ago. And just this week, defeating number 24 Arizona State 42-32. They are grooving. They beat Stanford last week too. Bad, 34-16. UCLA is figuring it out under Chip Kelly. They're 3-5, but keep this in mind. They're 3-2 in the Pac-12 South. So yes, a 3-2, 3-5 overall UCLA team could make the Pac-12 championship game because they're 3rd in the Pac-12 South, only behind Utah and USC, both of which are 4-1, and then they still have yet to play them. If UCLA keeps this going and somehow upsets one or both, UCLA, as a potential 5 or 6 loss team, could be in the Pac-12 championship game. And once again, that's what makes college football so crazy, so unpredictable, and so unbelievable. Watch out for Chip Kelly. It sounds like maybe he and the Bruins are finally turning a page in his 2nd year with the Bruins. And then finally, on our team trending up, Kansas State. We mentioned them earlier with that monster upset over Oklahoma. We'll mention them again. They started 3-0, fell to 3-2, and now they've won back-to-back games over a TCU team that just beat Texas, bad, convincingly, and then beat Oklahoma. They just beat Oklahoma by 7 points in Manhattan. So Chris Kleiman is doing a phenomenal job in just his first year with the Wildcats and first year coaching at the FBS level. Already has a top 5 win to his name, a signature win to his name. The Wildcats look like they're going bowling, sitting at 5-2. Don't count them out of the Big 12 title race just yet. Very slim chances right now, but it is still extremely possible. So watch out for the Wildcats, taking major strides in year 1 under Kleiman. Bigger things to come down the road. On our teams trending down, we mentioned Texas Tech and that wild ending against Kansas and how wild the Big 12 has been this week 9. If you go back and watch the highlights of this game, Texas Tech blocked the game-winning field goal for Kansas. It was blocked. They recovered it and tried to run it back. They then decided to lateral the ball to nobody. I assume they thought someone was there, but he pitched it back. No one was there. Kansas then fell on it. They fell on it with 2 seconds remaining, which means that Kansas regained possession, still in field goal range. They had one last chance to line up for a game-winning field goal, and they made it. The Red Raiders blew a 17-point lead to Les Miles and the Jayhawks. After that big win over Oklahoma State a few weeks ago, they have now lost 3 straight games. 3-point loss to Kansas this past Saturday. Matt Wells and the Red Raiders, a 3-5 team, struggling mightily. You know, this was a win that they needed to try to get to a bowl game. And with this loss to Kansas, their bowl hopes are getting slimmer and slimmer. So crushing loss for Texas Tech. It's an unsmart play, a disciplined game by Texas Tech and the Red Raiders. Matt Wells, a lot of things to perfect going forward this season. We've got Duke up on the board. Man, a team that I really liked as they were getting going this season. They were 3-1, had that huge win over Virginia Tech, 45-10. And since that 3-1 start, they are now 4-4. They are now 1-3 since the 3-1 start. They've lost 3 of their last 4, the only win coming against Georgia Tech. And they just lost to North Carolina in a game where Deion Jackson tried to do a little jump pass. The running back took the handoff, tried to do a little jump pass, and threw it right to North Carolina. I mean, literally, it was like a spike into North Carolina. No arch or anything. North Carolina and Matt Brown escaped for a victory. Duke now sitting at 4-4, and obviously have questions on whether or not they're going to be able to make a bowl game because the rest of the schedule, while there are winnable games, looks a little shaky to me. And then finally, Nebraska, a team that we probably should have had up here a long time ago. A team where the hype simply was not real. They were getting too much hype. And many, including myself, bought into that hype. But Scott Frost and the Cornhuskers started the season 3-1 going into that Ohio State game. That one loss, of course, being very disappointing to Colorado. And since that 3-1 start, they are also, like Duke, 1-3. They're 4-4 overall. Just came off a loss to Indiana at home, a team that we had trending up last week, a team that's 6-2. So look out for the Hoosiers. But they've had blowout losses to Ohio State. They've had a blowout loss to Minnesota. They just lost to Indiana at home. And they still have games at Purdue, a home game against Wisconsin, at Maryland, and a home game against Iowa. Nebraska and Scott Frost have to win 2 of those. I don't know if they can do it. So for the second straight year, Nebraska may not be going bowling under Scott Frost. And if they do, they'll just barely go bowling, maybe 6-6 if they're lucky, 7-5, but I highly doubt that. A Nebraska team that got way too much hype, they're still a ways away from really competing, not just in the Big Ten, but on the national level under Scott Frost. Give them time. This was just simply not the year. So a wild week 9. Take a look at our board here. Obviously, very disappointing across the board. We went 18-12 straight up. So 60% there. Obviously, a lot of these upsets did not do us any favors, although it could have been worse. We put out a couple prediction changes out on Twitter. Had we not done that, that record could have been a little worse. So we'll take it. Overall is now 273-81, so 77.1%. So once again, that's still a 1.1% above what we want to be at the end of the season. And obviously, that percentage can rise or fall however we want to over the remainder of the season, over the remaining month of the season. So still looking good straight up. Against the spread, horrible week. Very disappointing week. For lack of better words, we are extremely pissed. We are extremely pissed. Ball didn't go our way. A couple questionable calls here and there that kind of didn't hurt us. A couple teams that didn't show up. And that simply is on us. We are not happy with it. 3-7, 30%, 49-42-1, 54.3% overall on the year. Might be hard to believe, but that's still one of the better marks out there right now. Still better. Go look for yourself if you don't believe me. Still better than CBS, Saturday Down South, and a handful of people over at ESPN, which I know is a reliable source for many. So we're still happy with our overall. We're not happy with our results in week 9. We are disappointed. We are frustrated. We are angry. But I can promise you this, there will not be another week the rest of the season that we go below 500. November is about to get started, which means the fun and the craziness in college football is about to get started. And that means our spread picks are going to be even better than ever. And I can take you my word on that. So a horrible, disappointing week. We're not happy about it. I'm sure you're not either. And we promise to make it up to all of you that have signed up and will continue to sign up for the remainder of this season. So guys, crazy week 9. Tons of stuff coming up in week 10. Another big week. Huge ranking shakeups coming out tomorrow. You don't want to miss that. Predictions coming out on Tuesday. And then, of course, game of the week previews leading up to another huge Saturday in college football. It's the first Saturday in November. Things are about to get crazy. This is where the fun begins. So guys, thank you for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert. Make sure to go follow us on Twitter at Gridiron Expert. Check out the official website, thegridironexpert.com. And of course, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.